Nós sabemos que a sua visita foi um foco do lobby sionista. Você poderia falar sobre os impactos do lobby em sua trajetória?
Yes. The lobby is trying to silence voices like mine for quite a long while, especially because I'm an Israeli Jew. And they feel that if someone from Israel justifies the Palestinian claims, it gives the claims even more credibility and validity. So, I encounter the lobby everywhere I go, whether it is by canceling my talks, whether by forcing me to talk in a different place than the original place. But the lobby also works in a different way. It tries to disqualify me as an academic. They make a great effort to show that I'm not a professional historian, that I write propaganda and not a proper history. So they try to undermine your credibility on the one hand, and on the other hand, to try and stop you talking to people. So it is a challenge. But in most cases where people are not afraid of the lobby, this challenge can be met. There are places where the lobby is successful, and then I don't have a chance, unfortunately, to talk to people.
Você diferencia ocupação e colonialismo de assentamento no seu livro A Maior Prisão do Mundo, recentemente lançado pela editora Elefante. Em algumas regiões do Brasil, colonizadores europeus, que também vinham de uma história trágica de passado, vêm para o nosso território com o propósito de construir uma vida nova e permanentemente, o que implica num genocídio da população autóctone, da população indígena no Brasil. Em algum momento, você já pensou essa relação entre os colonialismos latino e israelense?
Yes, I did. It was very important for me to show that what happened to the Palestinians was not a unique historical phenomenon. That the Jews who came to Palestine were refugees, were people who were expelled from Europe in many ways. Europe didn't want them, and they wanted to build a new Europe outside of Europe. And they chose a place where already other people lived, the indigenous Palestinians. And as so many good scholars of settler colonialism said or pointed out, that in the encounter between those Europeans that Europe didn't want, and that they wanted to create a new Europe outside of Europe, in the encounter with indigenous people, as the late Patrick Wolf called it, the logic of elimination of the native was activated. And I think that it's very important to show that almost all the settler colonial projects in South America, in Central America, in North America, in Australia, in South Africa, in New Zealand, and in Palestine had something in common, which Patrick Wolf rightly pointed out. In order to build a new Europe, in order to make the new land the homeland, the main obstacle in the eyes of the settlers were the indigenous people. And they had no hesitation to eliminate the native people. First of all, because they did not regard them as real human beings like the Europeans. And secondly, because we know it happens that people who are victims are not necessarily behaving towards other people in a different way. As we used to say, a victimized person can become a victimizer. Like abused children can be abusive parents. And this is something that is important to point out to, because First of all, it shows that Zionism is not unique on the one hand, and secondly, that the struggle for justice in Palestine is a struggle for global justice for all those people who were victims of settler colonialism. And it's so important to show the difference between that and classical colonialism. Because classical colonialism, with all its evils, wanted to exploit the people, not to eliminate them.
Yes.
And the classical colonialists had a homeland to go back to.
Mhm.
But the settlers lost their homeland and regarded the new place as their homeland. And in many ways, in order to settle this problem in the future, the settlers would have to be accepted as indigenous, but for that, they have to accept what they did to the indigenous people, finding a way to compensate and to stop where it still continues the elimination of the native.
Ainda nesse livro, você fala em 2 modelos de prisão e que o terceiro governo, em 67, abandonou a limpeza étnica como estratégia de colonização. Como você vê isso hoje, após 2023, em relação a Gaza e Cisjordânia? Teria retomado a proposta inicial de 48? Acha que a divisão da limpeza étnica em etapas mudou? Eu vejo o genocídio, como você chamou no seu outro livro, Brevíssima, História, como o pior capítulo da história moderna. E isso me faz lembrar os motes do Plano C, que você descreve em seu outro livro, Limpeza Étnica da Palestina, que falavam em destruir escolas, clubes, cafés, danificar transportes, matar palestinos. Você poderia comentar?
First of all, you're right. In the book, I say that I also detail on the basis of documents from the Israeli government that in 1967, for a moment, the Israeli government thought, the 13th government, thought that they could do in 67 what they did in 1948. But then they decided against it because the war was very short, there was already television, and they were not sure that they could do the same. So they opted for a different method. If we cannot expel people, we can imprison them. We can put them in enclave, without allowing them free movement, and then it's the second best solution. Ethnic cleansing was preferred solution, but it was impossible. So at least we keep them without any civil rights or human rights, and we control them. And this is what I call the prison model. And as I say in the book, if they behave well, then they have an open prison, a more easy life in the prison. If they reject the prison, they will be punished with a more severe kind of prison. Now, this was the policy of most of the Israeli governments until the election of the most right-wing government in Israel history in November 2022. In November 22, an ideological group that since 1948 was very marginal in Israeli politics became the dominant power. They did not believe in the prison model. They believed that what Israel did in 1948, they should do again. So they, first of all, began pressure on the Palestinians in the West Bank to leave Area C, which is about 60% of the West Bank. And as far as they are concerned, they said, okay, if we cannot impose a massive ethnic cleansing immediately, we can do it incrementally, in a gradual way. They were also thinking, I think, until October 2023, that they somehow solved the issue for the Gaza Strip because of the siege and the blockade. And I think they were surprised by the Hamas attack on the 7th of October. And the Hamas attack gave them the excuse to say, okay, In the case of Gaza, we can escalate, do something even worse than the ethnic cleansing, the genocide. So what connects these all stations in history is that the Zionist project sees the Palestinian demography as the most important obstacle for building a Jewish state.
Yes.
And the question for them is all the time how to deal with this demography, how to make it smaller or even get rid of it. So until 1948, the Zionist movement doesn't have the capacity to do anything. They can only dream about a Jewish state, but they cannot do this. 1948 gives them an opportunity. They try to expel all the Palestinians, but for all kinds of reasons to do with their own power and the resistance of the Palestinians and the neighboring Arab states, they are only able to expel half of the Palestinians and take over only 80, nearly 80% of historical Palestine. But like all settler colonial movements, they are not only interested in demography, they're also interested in geography. They want space. And the more space they occupy, they get even more Palestinians. So they get rid of the Palestinians in 1948, but then they incorporate more Palestinians in 1967 because of this balance between space and people, geography and demography. So eventually, the political powers of Zionism that from very early on said there is no compromise on the territory. The whole of Palestine belongs to the Jewish people, win the Israeli, not only the Israeli election, but also the Israeli consensus. So there is no party today, no real political party in Israel today that question the right of Israel to control the whole of historical Palestine. So this is now a consensus position. If this is the position, the question remains what to do with the millions of Palestinians. What we used to call the left said that maybe if we give them autonomy, they will be happy and we somehow control the situation. This was tried in Oslo. It didn't work. Then came the post-Oslo policy of Ariel Sharon, the late Israeli prime minister. And he said, no, the best thing to do is to divide the West Bank into a Jewish West Bank and a Palestinian West Bank to squeeze the Palestinians even more. Some of them would leave, and those who remain would be controlled from the outside. And then he did the similar thing in Gaza, but he took out the settlers because there were few settlers. The resistance of the Palestinians continued. They were unwilling to live as inmates of mega prisons, and they resisted. And then it gave an excuse, a pretext to the policymaker to say, we tried ethnic cleansing, we tried siege, we tried autonomy, and it all is not working, especially not in Gaza. So in their eyes, they are entitled to do now genocide because no other option is left. Now, we know from settler colonialism, and we know from the Nazis, and we know from every moment in history where people were genocided, that the precondition to genocide people is to dehumanize. You have to think that they are not human beings like you. Otherwise, you cannot do it. You have to dehumanize it. And the Zionist movement in its educational system and cultural system, from the very beginning, dehumanized the Palestinians, which is not, we talked about similarities with Brazil. In order to genocide the natives here, you also had to dehumanize them, to say they are savages. They are not really people like us, or they are nomads. They push them out. So I think that's the connection that I think some good people in the world still do not understand it, that unless you analyze Zionism and settler colonialism, you do not understand the objective of Zionism, which is to have as much of Palestine as possible, with as few Palestinians as possible, and the fact that there are very few moral inhibitions for how to do it. The inhibition has to do with pressure from the outside. That's why only the world can stop the genocide. Israel has no dynamics inside that would stop the genocide. Yeah.
Bom, obrigada. E, bom, você falou, né, estou aqui, 48, é o ano da Nakba, da catástrofe palestina. Em relação ao acesso aos documentos dos arquivos israelenses, um arquivo indicativo salvando documentos da Nakba, como segue essa sua iniciativa?
Yes, I created a charity with friends in England called the Nakba Memorial Foundation. So we are already 2 years old. We collect documents that Israel has closed, reclassified, did not allow historians to see anymore. I don't know, maybe they even destroyed some of these documents, but people have kept copies of the documents. Mm-hmm. So we are collecting these documents. We are translating them to English. Later we will translate them to Arabic, so that future generation of historians could be able to see also through the Israeli documents what happened in 94, because there is still today a widespread denial of the Nakba, especially at the level of political elites and mainstream journalism. So it's very important that this evidence is being protected and kept. People can look at our website, the Nakba Memorial Foundation. We have a website where we begin to show some of these documents. We see it as a very sacred mission, you know. We hope one day to have a center against Nakba denial. We think it's very important, because it's not only keeping the Israeli documents that is vital, but also the oral testimonies of Palestinians, all kinds of other ways of evidence, you know, types of evidence. So, yes, we are struggling with, like everyone else, with funding, but we hope one day to get more funding, and then we can expand our activities. But we're very happy that we saved quite a few important documents that nobody else has. And they show very clearly the intention behind the ethnic cleansing of 1948. Not only the execution of the ethnic cleansing, but also the planning of the ethnic cleansing. Because even some supporters of Palestinians today would say, oh, you know, it's the Palestinians became refugees because there was a war, and this happens in a war. And we show it's not. The war was the means to expel the Palestinians. They did not become refugees because of the war. The war was the way to make them refugees. And I think we show it clearly through the document.
Inclusive, por falar nesses seus projetos, eu soube que você articulou esse projeto da Nakba em contato com a diáspora palestina na América Latina. Como você pensa o papel dos palestinos em diáspora hoje na formação de um Estado palestino?
I think that the Palestinians in South America have a very important role to play. Because, first of all, they are not in the West, and there is less pressure that you may find in countries where, for example, the Holocaust occurred. Germany, for instance. So it should be a bit easier. Secondly, the Palestinian societies are much older here. Many of them are, and therefore are much better established in the local societies. So they should have more influence on politics than smaller Palestinian communities. Especially in Europe, they are newcomers, they are small in numbers, they have less influence on politics. So I would hope that they would even play a more active role in persuading the governments here to take even a more tough action on Israel. Some governments already did it, like Colombia, but I think we need more. And they can act as a very powerful and effective lobby. It would be, and of course, I think all the Palestinians in the world will take part in the consultation. What kind of Palestine would they like to have? And for that, probably they will need to reorganize the PLO, an old Palestine Congress, and so on. But this is a bit for the future. But I do think that it's very important. I must say that the younger Palestinian generation in South America is very much in contact with young Palestinians all around the world, including in historical Palestine. They have a much better connection, and they share the same vision of the future than the older generation that is still fragmented and does not act always in unity.
Bem, na Flip, você mencionou que os territórios da operação do Hamas, em outubro de 2023, eram originalmente vilarejos palestinos. No Brasil, os indígenas têm feito ações chamadas de retomada de terras. Você fala em retorno. O que você acha dessas aproximações?
I think there is a connection in the sense that people have not forgotten where they came from, and they would think that even if the place where they lived was already destroyed and maybe a new place was built instead of it, they want first and foremost a recognition that they came from these places. And secondly, that they were uprooted forcefully and illegally from their places. I suppose every case is different in terms of what can be done. What can you, does it mean that you have to destroy the new place? Or does it mean that you are being compensated for the place? Or does it mean that you are opening the place for everyone to live in it? This is nothing new in a way. You know, in some more successful cases in the world, a return of refugees, transitional justice worked. And people were either allowed to go back or were compensated or came back near the original place. I think the similarity is in recognizing this as an important factor in the future. Because mostly because of the balance of power, these demands of indigenous people, whether they are in Brazil or in Palestine, are ignored because they're not powerful enough. And instead of using the balance of power as the indication what should be discussed and not, instead of the balance of power, we should look at the demands of the victims as determining the agenda, not the balance of power. And that happened in Brazil and also in Israel and Palestine. The balance of power determines the agenda. And that will never lead, not only it will not lead to justice, it will not stop the conflicts.
Enfim, você escreveu e falou várias vezes sobre o colapso do sionismo. Algo mudou desde as suas últimas falas? E se mudou, por quê?
No, everything that happened ever since convinced me even more that this is what is happening in front of our eyes. The internal implosion of the society from within in Israel, the very deep economic crisis, the lack of confidence that Israelis have in their own political system. Many more Israelis have left Israel since I made this prediction. Israel's position became even more isolated than it was before. Many more Jews have decided not to identify with Israel. So all the processes I identified became even more intensive in a way and accelerated. Uh, but as also I said in that article, I know that there are all kinds of development that are stopping this from happening right now, whether it is populist policies, populist leaders like Trump, populist leaders like Urban in Hungary, if the rise of right-wing neo-fascist parties in Europe, uh, the Arab rulers' unwillingness to face Israel. But I also said that this is not forever. We can see in Brazil, a populist leader was not successful in the last elections. This can also happen in the United States. It can also happen in Europe. So I think that the trend I was talking about is still there. The trend where you will unfortunately see the next immediate future as bad as it is now, unfortunately. But it is the end of a very bad cycle. I believe that history is cyclic, linear. And I think we are in a very bad cycle, but I hope I'm right by thinking that this is the end of the cycle, not the beginning of a new one. So this, I hope so. We all hope so. And I think there are indications that, because one thing we know about populist leaders, they're not very competent. They don't know how to run, how to deal with economic crisis. They are too self-centered to think about the problems of society. So they never solve that's what populism is, isn't it? They don't solve really the problem. They talk about it. And eventually they pay the price for this. We just hope that this will happen sooner than later.
Por fim, eu gostaria de saber sobre, a gente sabe, enfim, né, nós sabemos que o lobby tenta boicotar suas atividades, dizendo que você, e aí, né, citando eles, incita o ódio entre os povos. Você gostaria de comentar algo sobre isso para finalizar?
Yes. Yes, I don't think I'm promoting hatred, on the contrary. I'm looking all the time for a way of people to live together rather than hate each other. I think what I realize is that in many ways the Jews in Israel are lucky because whatever they did to the Palestinians in the last 130 years or so, the main Palestinian impulse is not for revenge. Palestinians want to live normal life. That's all they want. And they have been denied normal life since the arrival of Zionism. And I think that this is a very important basis for hope in the future, that the future is not based on revenge, but is based on equality, a normal life for those who were denied this normal life. And this is not about hatred between two people. This is about finding a way of living together despite of what the Zionist movement had done to the Palestinians. And this happened before in the world. With all the right criticism that we have on South Africa after apartheid, and there's a lot to criticize there, still it worked because Nelson Mandela was not looking for revenge, he was looking for justice. And through the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, this was a very perfect model of restorative justice or transition justice. Right? And so it's possible. It is possible. So no, I think the lobby is spreading fear, hatred, racism, and does not allow in fact, the people of Palestine and Israel to find a way of living together. It is a very negative phenomenon in our life.
Eu gostaria, a gente tem uma lembrança para ti, mas primeiro queria agradecer em nome tanto da editora Elefante, quanto também da Federação Palestina, Árabe-Palestina do Brasil, do Centro de Estudos Palestinos da USP e do Núcleo de Estudos Palestinos da UFPR. É muito importante ter você aqui, ter sua presença e te ouvir nesse momento significativo da história palestina. Obrigada. Shukran.
Oh, gift for you.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
We don't know if you like sweets, but it's rapadura.
I know.
It's a Brazilian, you know rapadura?
No, I don't.
No?
But I will know it.
It's a very sweet dessert made of cane or brown sugar. And
Okay.
it's very hard, but if you can eat raw, or you can cut small pieces and put in your coffee or
And the
tea.
coffee.
Yeah, to make things sweet.
Okay, thank you so much.
I
Thank you
hope
so
you
much.
like. Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank you.